Kia ora, hello. Haere welcome to the channel. I haven't been on for quite a long time, so I want to apologise first to all my subscribers, especially for having no content up for a while. I am struggling lately with my ADHD, which has never been diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure I've got it. But anyway, I thought I'd just jump on here because it's been too long, and for quite a while, since Ozzy Osbourne from Black Sabbath died, I've been wanting to get on and do a video about him, but I was going to do it as soon as I heard he passed away, but I just couldn't get it together, and numerous videos are out there now. Anyway, I still want to talk about Ozzy. You can find a lot of videos out there, some very good ones, which I may share the links to a couple others that I really liked from other channels about Ozzy. If you want to know more about, you know, the history of Ozzy and etc. This one's going to be more about my remembrance of Ozzy and how Ozzy had a big influence on me, especially when I was a teenager. So I want to talk mostly about that. I'm trying to remember back as far as I can to when I first became aware of Ozzy Osbourne with Black Sabbath, and I can't really remember, but what I do know is that my older brother, Philip, he had their first album, which came out when, was that 69? 69, Paranoid came out in 70, I believe. Now, I would have been, how old would I have been then? God, I have to think about this, maybe 14 or something like that. And I would hear my brother, I didn't know much about Black Sabbath at all, but I would hear my brother play these songs from the first album. And, you know, we had separate bedrooms, but I would hear him play them, and I would hear it from my bedroom. And, you know, when my mum wasn't home, or my dad, he'd turn it up fairly loud. And so I thought, yes, that sounds kind of cool. That's really unique. And I'd never heard anything quite like it. Somewhere around that time, if that was 69, no, it must have been the following year. My brother was in a band, which he formed with some friends called Rat Salad. Now, of course, those of you who are pretty up with Black Sabbath will know that Rat Salad is a track from their second album, Paranoid, right? So the reason they called themselves by that name is because they did a lot of Black Sabbath covers. I mean, this is getting into 71, and I would have, I went to see their band quite a few times, and I went to a few of their practices, and I distinctly remember a concert they did on Waiheke Island in off the coast of Auckland, where they played in the Oniroa Hall, I think it was, and me and a bunch of my friends went over. This would have been, God, this is getting more into like, this would have been more like, I think, I'm not sure if it's 71 or 72, but I went, you know, I was still at school then, still at high school. I went over with a group of my friends, one of whom's parents had a batch. A batch is what we call like a little beach house, very small holiday home, and this one just had one little sleep out and, a very small caravan parked on it. So we went over there for the weekend because I also knew that Philip's band, Rat Salad, would be playing there. So we thought, we'll make the most of it. I think it was an Easter weekend or something when we had an extended holiday from school. And so, I think that was one of possibly the first times I ever saw them play live at a gig. And back then, lighting for bands was pretty minimal. They had one of those real old school, I don't know what you'd call it, like a black light and a old school oil colours thing that made colours and bubbles, or early kind of psychedelic effects, I suppose you could call it. And it was pretty cool. I hadn't seen anything much like that before, even though I'd been into the odd club and stuff. Because back then, you could go to nightclubs. You didn't have to. There was no alcohol served, so you didn't have to be the age then was 20 to drink, so it was okay. But I hadn't seen much in the way of, special lighting even in those clubs much. So this was quite an event, and I was just simply blown away, and that really got me more into Black Sabbath's music. I think they covered, I think it was, what was it? I know that they covered, let me think about this, they definitely covered NIB off the first album and Evil Woman, and then Paranoid off the second album, and some other songs of theirs. They did quite a few. I can't I can't remember the other tracks right at this moment, but they played quite a few. I mean, that's why they named themselves after one of their tracks. And as far as I knew, although I didn't get out to clubs much, although, as I said, I had been to some clubs in Auckland City, but I definitely didn't see any other bands covering Black Sabbath songs. So it seemed quite unique to me, and it got me more into it, and seeing my own brother play this music live. And then somewhere along the line, I don't know if it was 71 or 72 or even earlier, I brought my first album. I had an album that was given to me, I think, by my sister, Rolling Stones album, but I'd never had the money, although I did have a paper run at that time. And I'm not sure how I paid for this album. Maybe it was from my paper run, I'm not sure. But I brought the Paranoid album. That was my first album. Now, once I bought that was it. I just thrashed that album to bits. And then the whole music of that album and Black Sabbath just it engulfed me. I was just totally taken in by it. Yeah, I was listening to other groups back then. I was still a teenager. I'm still like 15, 16. I'm listening to Jimi Hendrix, a lot of stuff that my brother, because I didn't really have the money to buy my own albums much back then. But, my brother, being in a band and been working, he bought lots of albums. So I used to hear Jimi Hendrix and Fleetwood Mac and Jethro Tull, Led Zeppelin, of course, and all of those sort of bands back then as well, a lot of whom I liked. But once I really got into Black Sabbath, they just took over me. They were my band. I just loved them more than anybody else. I really identified with them, and I think I really identified with Ozzy. There was something about him. There was something, I can't explain it, but, as a 14, 15, 16-year-old, I was just totally blown away by him. Well, the whole band, but especially Ozzy Osbourne. And I just think he was... I even, grew my hair long. I don't know if it was before then, but the way Black Sabbath had their hair quite long compared to some other bands that were around then, and they all had these dark clothes and they all seemed to have black hair except for Ozzy, and they often wore crucifixes, which I didn't think too much of, and you know, just I guess now knowing what I know now about them, that was all part of their kind of what some say is horror-like, doomy, because they got the idea for their band and the music from a horror film, evidently. But I didn't think about any of that. When you're a teenager, you don't necessarily process it. But I just love their whole image. And somewhere here, just to show you, and unfortunately Ozzy doesn't show, this is a black and white photo of my bedroom wall, and I've put on it 1972. So I would have been like 16. Now, a couple of posters are actually on the roof, which is one of the rare times my mother didn't like that at all, and especially as I use sellotape. But here we go. I hope you can see this. So I'm just going to... So that's it there. So unfortunately the picture of Black Sabbath, which is just up the top here, in the photo that I've taken, I've missed Ozzy's on the other end, and he's not in the photo. But you can see how they looked back then, and then I love them. And for what it's worth, you would have worked out the other photos there. That's Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, of course, and then we've got, is it Deep Purple down here, and bit of Alice Cooper. You can just see his face with a snake. Up here on the ceiling is Mountain, the band Mountain, and the other one's too obscured, but I think it's the woman from a band called Curved Air, the singer. Was her name Sonja Christian or something? Anyway, this is about Ozzy, so let's get on with that. But that gives you an idea of where I was at as a teenager, right into all the music. Got all the posters I could out of different magazines, or I'd buy posters and stuff. But I was absolutely enamored by Black Sabbath. I would just play their music over and over again. And I ended up getting my own copy of the first album, and those two albums I would thrash, and I would take them to my mate's place, and play them at their place, and they grew to some of my mates weren't into it, but some of my good mates, they just loved it as much as I do, and we would play these records over and over. We were just, well, me especially, was obsessed by Black Sabbath. I thought they were, what's that saying? The best thing since sliced bread back then. So the other thing I want to say is that I was lucky enough that in 1973, January of 1973, Black Sabbath actually came to Aotearoa. And they played at one of the first ever 3-day music festivals in this country called the Great Ngaruawahia Festival, which is just a little bit before Hamilton. So it's up more up the north of the North Island, not right up north, but before you get to Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland. I went to that with some of my mates, and we took a tent, and wow, that was just quite an experience. So I would have just turned 17 then. I was still a bit naive about life, I'd finished my last year at school. I only went to the fifth form. What would be that equivalent to now? Would that be like year 9, 10, maybe the equivalent to, I guess, year 11? I mean, it was holiday time. I can't remember if I had a school holiday job. I think I did. I can't remember what it was. I know I worked in a furniture shop, and later I had a job in a supermarket. But anyway, we went to this festival, and so, of course, we got to see them live. Back then, I used to drink a lot of alcohol. I almost turned into an alcoholic back then. I'm glad I saw the light not long after that, well, later that year. I had a few bad experiences that put me off alcohol. But so most of that festival, we were just drinking truckloads of beer, and probably a lot of the older people there were taking other substances, that I was completely naive about at that stage of my life. But I was just I was just over the moon to be able to see these guys live. I never thought that would happen. And I managed to get right up the front. And I had a camera back then. The cameras they were called Instamatic cameras. Of course, nothing was digital, so you had to plonk your film in and hope that they turned out all right, but you wouldn't know till you took the film in and got it developed. Well, in actual fact, there's a few of my photos that turned out not too bad, all things considered, the quality of cameras back then. And if I could find them, but I can't locate them at the moment, I would show them to you. But that was one of the highlights for me at that age, right? Now I would go on to Ozzy was it for me out of that band. I just associated with him the most. I didn't, some people go years later when you hear people say, "Oh, Ozzy, he's got a weird voice. He hasn't got your typical, what do you call it? I don't know, stereotypical, whatever people consider a good rock voice." But he had a unique voice, and no one else had a voice like him. Back then, I never even thought about that stuff. I just loved him, and I loved the music, and I didn't care. I just thought it was just incredible. And the first two albums I loved, especially Paranoid. I just, to this day, I still love that album. I bought the third album, Master of Reality. Didn't like it as much, but I liked some tracks on it. And then when the fourth album came along, which is called Black Sabbath 4, I really liked that album, more so than I did the previous one. But I have to say, I don't know. I think it would be a toss-up between Paranoid, and for my second favourite would be a toss-up between the first album, Black Sabbath 4. I could take or leave Master of Reality. But the albums that followed, which I think were Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, I was a bit let down by that, like the odd song on it. And the same as, I think, Sabotage. After that, I started to lose interest. I left school. I thought I was like becoming an adult. I wasn't. I got out and went flatting, became a bit more worldly, and I started getting into lots of other different types of music, right? Including jazz and jazz fusion and all sorts of stuff. So I kind of, I don't know, I kind of drifted away from the heavy rock a bit, if you like. But it always stayed with me, especially Black Sabbath. I think my theory is if you're a big music fan, and I mean, not the sort of person that just, mainly enjoys mainstream music. If you're the sort of person that from a young age, you've got into music that's a bit alternative or not mainstream, whatever it might be, whether it's folk or heavy metal or psychedelic or whatever it is, and you go out and you seek out albums and you find, back then we had no internet, and you try and discover, you read music mags and you try and get all the info you can. And I think those sort of people that stay with that and have that passion for finding different music that's often away from the mainstream, I think the music that really inspires them, this is my take on it, in their teenage years, there's something about that time in your life, definitely for me, and I could say this to quite a few of my friends that were big music lovers then and still are now, that even though you may go on and sort of get into other music, perhaps more so later on, the music like that, and for me, Black Sabbath, that you love so much, and it's what's the word? I can't think of the word. There's a word when something in your life it's a pivotal. No, it's a I can't think of the word. God, has a big effect on you, impact. No, there's another word. Anyway, I'm not going to worry about it. I think it stays with you right through your life. I mean, I can remember, down the track after going way down heaps of rabbit holes into music, different types of music, electronic music, even getting into country and country rock and all sorts of stuff. I drifted right away from a lot of metal and didn't really listen to it because it was like kind of that was old. That was what I was into back then. But it, the stuff that you really loved, like my love of Black Sabbath, never really went away. And then slowly, I would start over the years. I would start revisiting it, and I would think, I still love this stuff, and I do. I never get sick of it. I never get sick of the Paranoid album. I could play it, anytime. And I think it embeds with you. I think that stays with you no matter what else you get into. There are some music that you might get into a teenager, and then years down the track, you might go, yeah, nah, take it or leave it now. You grow out of that for whatever reason. But I think the ones that really, stick with you, mean something to you, and all the memories you had back then that surround that, I think they always stay with you, right through. I wanted to come on and talk about Ozzy, as I say, after his death, but I never got it together. And then I was going to come on and do a little, I'll do it just before they decided to televise live the, what do you call it? The funeral, what do they call it? Not the funeral procession, but there's a word begins with C. Anyway, when Ozzy, was in the hearse, and they were on their way to their private family funeral, they also decided to go through Birmingham, Black Sabbath's hometown, and they went across an area in Birmingham called the Black Sabbath Bridge. It's actually called that, so I believe. And since Ozzy passed, and all of you who are big Black Sabbath fans have probably seen all this footage already. It's probably been on the news tonight. They showed all this live right up to when they left there, because when they got to the Black Sabbath Bridge and this area where people from the moment Ozzy died had gone and laid flowers and cards and all that sort of stuff in memory, and it was a huge area, and it was just, so they decided to stop there and go out, and you could see Sharon Osbourne, Ozzy's wife, and his two kids, Jack and what's the daughter's name? Can't think of it off the top of my head. Zoe? No, I've got that wrong, I think. Anyway, maybe it'll come to me. You can put it in the comments if you want. I'll probably think of it afterwards. There's another daughter too, and I wondered, I stayed up. I was going to come on before that, but I made a mistake about the timing, and I knew that we were so many hours ahead. What is it? We're like 1 hour. Is it 1 hour behind, but the next day? or something like that. I think it works. And somehow I had made a mistake when I was trying to work out the difference, and I worked out it wasn't going to be on till about midday our time and about 1 o'clock their time, which is totally wrong. It was actually, it started at 12 a.m. Started at 12 a.m. our time, which was like 1 p.m. their time, I think, something like that. And I only just realised last minute, I saw something online and I'd been out and I saw it. And I thought, oh no, God, there goes that idea. Because I was going to go on and talk about Ozzy and then tell people when the live footage had come. And I got that wrong because, well, there were several media outlets that were filming it or showing it live. But the first one I came across was from a link from the Black Sabbath Facebook page, which took you to, I think, I don't know if it's a Black Sabbath website. I'm confused now. But it took you to this live footage, but it had no audio sound. And when I started watching, all I could see was the people milling around. I didn't even know what it was because there was no audio at this Black Sabbath bridge. I couldn't even really make it out. I could see them milling around something, but I couldn't. Wasn't a very good visual. And I thought, this is stupid having no audio. And then somewhere in amongst it, I Googled a few things, and then I found that the BBC on their YouTube channel were broadcasting it live via their YouTube channel, because normally you can't get the BBC here straight unless you, I don't know, pay money to sign up for it. So I soon switched to that, and that was way better quality footage. And, you know, it split it up into a couple of screens where you had the people at the funeral and someone in the studio talking all about Ozzy's life, while they were waiting for the procession to come through, and interviewing different people and people that were down on the ground near the Black Sabbath bridge and all this sort of thing. So it was pretty cool, but I didn't know what it was going to. I didn't even know at that stage that it was going to be a private funeral. I didn't know whether we were going to actually see a public funeral. I didn't know all that until as things went on, and then one of the announcers, narrators said the fact that they were going on for a private funeral at, is it Buckinghamshire or something like that. Evidently, that's, well, I assume that's where perhaps Ozzy still lives. It's out in the country somewhere, but probably out of Birmingham. I don't know if I've even got the right word right. But it sounded like the one I'd heard about, either Buckinghamshire or Beckham. I think it's Buckinghamshire. I don't know. Tell me in the comments. I'll need to look it up. But that was where the private funeral was going to be. And I know that a long time ago, Ozzy lived out there. I'm talking way back in like the 90s or something. By the way, as a recommendation of one of the best autobiographies I've ever read is Ozzy Osbourne's autobiography. It's one of the most, not only fascinating, but the guy is so funny, and the predicaments he gets himself in that he talks about is unbelievable. I highly recommend reading that book. It's so much fun. I guess maybe if you're not really an Ozzy, well, if you're probably not watching this if you're not an Ozzy fan, but if you're an Ozzy fan, if you haven't read that book already, I highly recommend it. You'll have one of the best laughs you'll ever have and find out some fascinating stuff about Ozzy. Just one spoiler that I have to tell you about, which I thought was unbelievable. Just to show you in Ozzy's wild rock and roll days, the state that he would sometimes get himself into from whatever drugs, alcohol, and a myriad of things combined. So I don't know I can't remember what time frame it was. It may have been in the 80s or the 90s. When he lived, I think, in this place that I still can't work out if it's Buckinghamshire or wherever, but out in the country in this big mansion. And from what I understand, or can remember from the story, he was home, or maybe it was another place before that. But anyway, it was out in the country and it was a mansion he had at the time. He was home alone, from what I've gathered, and what I can remember he said in this book. And it was at night, and the mansion that he was living, it caught on fire. As far as I think he said it burnt to the ground. He got out in time, and he ran out. He can't remember a thing about how it happened or what happened. All he can remember is one of his neighbours, who was this real, according to him, quite conservative next door neighbour farmer guy. He yelled out to Ozzy. He looked at Ozzy really strange and said something like, "You all right?" Ozzy said, this is the first thing he remembers about it, that he was standing, away from the house at the end of the driveway. All he was wearing was a woman's petticoat, negligee, and in his hand was a shotgun. I mean, that's bizarre. And he has no idea why he was dressed like that or why he was holding a shotgun. Go figure. But this is the sort of states Ozzy would get himself into. And there's numerous other things in the book where he gets into pretty wacky situations. It'll just crack you up. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable the guy lived as long as he did, It's probably his wife, Sharon, as other people have alluded to, that helped keep getting him back on the straight and narrow, even before they were a couple as such. She was his manager, and she often, got him to pull his head in and kind of get it together and sober up at many different times before he finally did, kick at least alcohol and quite a few other substances. I think towards the end of his life, well, he obviously got Parkinson's for the last 6 years, I believe he's had it. I think he even kicked it well before then. So, she probably saved him from, going to an earlier grave earlier. I mean, did pretty well at 76 as far as, those rock stars go. So many of them die young, as you know, especially the ones that lead the sort of lifestyle that he led for a long, long time. So there you go. What else do I have to say about this? I don't know. I just want to say how Ozzy Osbourne meant a lot to me as a teenager, and he's still, that stayed with me my whole life. So I just wanted to come on and talk about my experience with Ozzy and how he influenced me, and kind of, although I'm not a musician, he was in a funny sort of way, he was a mentor. Culturally, I think Ozzy was a mentor to me, just the way he was. Incredible. Yeah, go read his autobiography. I'm trying to think of the title of it. You can look it up. If I can remember it, I'll put it in the links below, in the comments below. Have I said enough about Ozzy Osbourne? you know what will happen? I'll get off and I'll go, oh, I should have mentioned this and I should have mentioned that. But I'm trying to rack my brains to think of any other sort of Aussie-related experiences. I can't think of any at the moment. So maybe I'll just end it there. Anyway, if you like me doing this, give me a like, give me a subscribe if you want to. No harm in that, doesn't cost anything. I'm going to try, and I've been trying for a while, to get more regular with this. I've probably said it before. There's a lot of unfinished stuff. I'm trying to sort of get my act together as best as I can and change my life a bit so I can get more control and organised. It's just that this, I think, combination of getting older and slowing down, and you know your memory's not as good. I think, you know, I'm 69 now. I'll be 70 next January. I think that combined with, pretty sure I've got ADHD, and that procrastination comes with that, makes it a lot harder for me to organise myself these days. But that being said, I'm trying to seriously do that better. But I have to make a lot of changes and get more disciplined with my life. But it's a work in progress, so fingers crossed. We will get there in my own time. So thanks for watching. Till the next video, which I hope is going to be soon, because I need to do this more regular, and also uploading more live bands that I've got a myriad of footage of, that I could at least be doing that, but I just haven't got around to it. And also I want to start doing more interviews. So yeah, hopefully a bit of all that. And I may get back to trying to do my gig guide again, which I started, but never continued my local gig guide for here in Porniki, Te Whanganui-a-Tara, Wellington. So I hope to get back to that. So it's ka kite, goodbye from me, and enjoy the rest of your evening. It's nearly 6:45 p.m. here on a Thursday night. Hopefully I'll get this uploaded later this evening and you'll be able to view it. Bye-bye.